I am, again, I'm Denise Moorhead, and I just wanted to give you just a very short introduction to our speakers this evening. It's Tom Alisi, as Nina had said. He's an investment advisor. Craig is a financial services professional. They work together at the Moody Street Group. Tom and Craig also lead the Moody Street Special Needs Resource Network. They both have had experience in dealing with a family member who has a disability. Their mission is to be a support for families of children who have a disability. The goal of the Special Needs Resource Network is to connect with as many organizations, advocates, and other professionals to be able to offer guidance and advice to those families. I promise you a really lively presentation this evening. Craig and Tom have worked with us over the last couple of years, and they are pretty amazing. They will give you lots of great information, and you're going to enjoy it while you hear this really good information. So make sure that you ask a lot of questions. You can put them in the Q&A, please. But before our speakers begin, I want to introduce you to Dr. Paul Stein. He's the Executive Director of Schools for Children. Dr. Stein has provided visionary executive leadership since 2017 for Schools for Children. On his watch, we've doubled the Schools for Children extended learning programs. We've embedded diversity and inclusion into the fabric of our programs. And he's helped us to create transition opportunities just like this, like different choices. He's a former superintendent of schools and a principal, and he began his career as a math teacher in alternative special education school settings. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Well, welcome everyone to Smart Money, which is part of Schools for Children Different Choices project. Last fall, when we first offered Different Choices, we envisioned an annual college fair and college and career fair for students with learning and social emotional challenges. Based on the feedback we received from students, families, caregivers, and support professionals, we decided to expand beyond a yearly event, as evidenced by this finance series. So, while it may seem that many services end when students leave the world of IEPs, 504s, and high school support staff, excellent programs do indeed exist. Finding them on your own can be overwhelming. With Different Choices, we are collaborating with wonderful partners to bring together resources and information that helps students and their families make a successful transition to college, careers, and other post-high school experiences. Together, we're also working to end the stigma associated with disabilities. Enjoy tonight's presentation and tell others about the series, which goes through May 12th. Visit us at differentchoices.org and let us know what you need to make transition from high school to college and career easier, more hopeful, and something you can anticipate with comfort and confidence. And thank you, Tom and Craig. I've been looking forward to your presentation.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, and appreciate the introduction, Nina and Denise as well. I don't know, it's a lot of pressure on us all of a sudden, but I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to bring up our presentation. Hopefully this works, because technology is one of those fun things for me that always seems to say it's going to work and then fails on me miserably whenever that happens. But we're going to start from the beginning and see if I can get this to pull up. No, why did it do that? Why is it doing that?
There, you almost there.
Yeah, no, I don't know why it's giving me the, so that's usually what happens. See, technology is a wonderful thing. Oh, I know why. There we go.
Bingo.
Uh-huh.
Well,
You know, well, it just happened. So having a blast with this. There we go. Okay. Look, see, technology, it's a wonderful thing. We're getting there. So our presentation for tonight is how to save on not for the cost of college. And we'll talk a little bit about that and get a little bit more detail with it. But generally, the idea is, especially for those of you who are in high school, the transition years, trying to save now for the cost of college, that train has already left the station. So this is ways, ideas, thoughts on how to save on the cost of college tuition. And, Nina and Denise were very kind with the introduction. I'm just going to sum up me real quickly. I've been doing this. I've been in investments, financial services for 23 years now. I'm an investment advisor. It means that I act as a fiduciary whenever giving guidance or advice to any of my clients. I'll bring my co-presenter, Craig. You want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Quickly, I'm Craig Richardson, financial representative, and I've been doing this for 18 plus years, and I work with families to help them have a better relationship with their money.
And so Craig will be chiming in as we go along, but just so you know, for the practical purposes of this, not only do we do this, but we are living this. So for myself, my oldest graduated 2 years ago. My youngest is a sophomore at UMass Amherst. And because I'm a planner, my kids were exactly 4 grades apart. So I get to do these forms and all this stuff that we're talking about 8 straight years in a row. Craig, your kids, you're right in the throes of this too, because your youngest is graduating this year.
Yeah, my youngest is going to be a sophomore at American University, and my oldest will go into her senior year at Roger Williams when she gets back from Europe. So
right. So we're right in the throes of this. So just know we're doing all of this too, and on a yearly basis as we do this. As Denise had introduced us, the Moody Street Group, we're a financial services firm located in Newton. But Denise summed up the part of the firm we dedicate to the Special Needs Resource Network. So let's get into the presentation, what we're going to be talking about. Some of this will be just the current cost of college, which is, as I said, Craig and I know very, very well and very dearly in terms of dealing with all of this. Some of that, hey, I'm trying to fund or take care of this education need, but at the same time, I'm trying to pay for save for my retirement. Right. And then we'll go through some of the basics, break down what they mean, some of the terms, some of the things that might come up, and then get into some of these secrets about how to get around some of this stuff, and a little bit at the end about some ways to, ethically and morally, not the whole, student scandal thing, get into the college of your choice or wherever you'd like to get into the college. Right, Craig?
Yeah, you want to play fair on this landscape.
Yeah. So one of the things that's going to come up on a regular basis is FAFSA, right? So this is the free application for federal student aid. That's what FAFSA stands for. Free application. There should be another F in there, by the way, because it's actually for federal student aid. But FAFSA, you'll hear us talk about this a lot because everything starts and ends with FAFSA. Any financial aid, any reduction in costs, anything begins with this form. So this is the form that you're going to want to make sure gets done and gets completed. Now, there is another form, depending on the institution or college of your choice. The FAFSA mainly applies, again, it's a baseline for everyone, but really for public university, public colleges, it starts and ends with FAFSA. For private institutions, Craig, because you have to go through this too, you have the CSS, which is the Scholarship Student College Scholarship Service application. That's most private institutions, right?
Yeah, so anytime it's not a public school, they'll ask you to do CLS, and then those schools may actually have additional requirements beyond as well. So.
Correct. But just know, for the purposes of trying to reduce costs, financial aid, it begins with this FAFSA form. And here's the thing with FAFSA. The FAFSA window opens on October 1st. So one of the things to make note of, so if we're talking about a student applying for the 2023 college year, you want to be filing FAFSA right as close as you possibly can after October 1st of 2022, because that's when the window opens. And the one thing with FAFSA and any of this application stuff is just know it is needs-based, but it's on a first-come, first-served basis, right, Greg? So it's like a limited pot of money. They're going to dole it out, but it's on a first come, first served basis.
Yeah, it is. So you absolutely want to be as timely with this as you possibly can. You're going to use the previous year's tax return, not this year's tax return. And, you know, the big thing that I see a lot of people make a mistake on is they think they're not going to get anything.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. We'll go through the ins and outs. We're going to come back to this form a couple of times and go through that, because that is one of the biggest things with it. But just know we spend time here on this because it is that important to the whole process. So let's talk about the current cost landscape. I mean, you know, if you've seen anything, but one of the things here with it is this is right now, you know, when the surveys go out to parents of high school students, you know, what are the main concerns? One, I'm going to pass away before my children are actually grown. I'm trying to save for my retirement because that's a hard thing to do. I'm worried about my job. And number 4 is saving and paying for the children's education. So it sort of goes in that line where, you know, you may think of where you sort of find some of this or feel some of this. But, you know, for us, Craig, that's what we deal with all the time. We have individuals, you know, parents. This is pretty much the feedback we get as well.
Yeah, a lot of times you feel like you're in a bubble all by yourself with these concerns, but more often than not, whenever we have conversation with people, these are the top things that do come up that everybody's facing. So, and
just realize that, you know, depending on the age of your child, and understand that even if they're a senior, like Craig's daughter, you know, who's going to become a freshman next year in college, these costs, that's just across the country, average cost. Public university, $22,000, private college or university, $50,000 plus. You know, those costs go up every year, and they have continued to go up every year. So this is something that's you know, it's constantly going up. So depending on how old your child is, whether they're a, you know, sophomore, junior, or senior in high school, these costs are going to continue, unfortunately, to go up. I don't know what your experience with that, Craig.
Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest. From the time my older daughter started to what I'm seeing now, you're probably talking, you know, 4 to 5% inflation rate every year.
And that's typical. That's, you know, usually when you look at anything or go to any of the websites or do anything, they usually will build in about a 6%, because that's generally for private institutions and our private university colleges. That's what the rate has been increasing at. So when we look at that from 4 years, right? So that's 4 years of public, and again, average across the country. Not necessarily here, we're in Massachusetts in the Northeast, you know, where things tend to be a little bit more expensive, but that's almost $90,000 right now, just for a 4-year public college or university. And private, you're talking over $200,000. That's the sticker cost of a 4-year education right now. And as it says, over 250 colleges have more than $50,000 a year. I want to say Brown is still number 1, and it's up towards, it's like $78,000 a year right now or something, or close to it.
I think it's like 82 or 83.
There we go. Okay, see, I haven't been paying attention since the kid wasn't looking at it, fortunately, that going through that. But $80,000 a year. I mean, you know, the numbers are staggering when you start looking at them like that. And here's the reality to it, is that the statistic is that of the freshman class that are going to enroll in the 2022 class, just over half of them are actually going to graduate in that, you know, less than half actually graduate in the 4 years. And what happens is it's that 5th and going on 6th year that ends up even driving the costs up higher for that education. So just understand that some of that is the institution itself, might be the major that the child has chosen, the classes that are available, how they're able to navigate through them, but that's the reality of it. And all of this comes down and it's for one child, right? So if you have more children, like Craig and I did, you know, these costs exponentially go up.
They both wanted to go to college, so I mean, I don't know. We thought about maybe just flipping a coin. One of you.
Yeah, which one, right? You can go, the other one can't. What is that? That's A Wonderful Life, right? The one kid gets to go, the other one doesn't. All right. So the retirement versus paying for college, right? So the idea there is in a perfect world, as parents, what we want is we want to be funding the education need of the child, but at the same time we want to be saving for our own retirement. And Craig, this comes in, this gets very, very emotional with families about, how am I doing this and how am I saving for this?
Yeah, I mean, and I will say every family is a little bit different in the way they look at it. And I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I mean, I see some families that, want to foot the whole bill for their children. I see some families who want to have their children have skin in the game as far as, having to pay for the cost of college. I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I think once you decide which way you're going to go, it's a matter of how do you be as efficient with it as you can.
Right. And the other one, and the reason we bring this up is because what happens a lot sometimes is you have parents who are then taking loans or distributions out of those retirement accounts to fund the education need.
Oh, I've seen that happen. Yeah, they actually, hurt their own retirement plans to try to get their child through college. And then they're trying to play makeup. Right. Mm-hmm.
And what you don't want to end up with is a situation where that has derailed your own plan. So again, this isn't like, hey, you're doing it any way you want to do it, but you just need to be thinking about how am I putting this in place and what are the steps and ways that I can do this so that I'm not, as Craig said, derailing or damaging my own retirement plan, which I've set up and saved for and built up out over time.
Well, one thing we tell people all the time, Tom, that you can borrow for education. You can't borrow for retirement. So.
That's true. That is very true. That is a good point. And one of the things to be thinking about and we'll get into the whole, loans and all that stuff in a little bit and talk about different ways of offsetting some of these costs and some of these needs. But don't lose hope, right? So again, college planning is not just saving for college. Like I said, for most families, most parents, by the time the child has become a sophomore or junior in high school, that ship has sailed, right? You're not going to be able to put away the $100,000 in a lump sum to satisfy the need for the child. So it's more about what are the ways that I can get around that and figure out how can I save on tuition costs? What can I do to lower some of these costs that I know are coming? And, that's the whole thing is it's not like, hey, you can just stuff it all into this account or that account and you're going to be all set. It really comes down to how the family's dealing with things. What are the ways you can do it? And some of those different circumstances that happen. And a lot of it comes down to making a choice, right? I know you're going through this with your child, with your daughter in terms of choosing a school and trying to find a school or the right school for her, basically. But some of that comes down to not only what's the best fit, but price-wise as well.
Yeah, to a certain degree. That's a little bit of a misnomer too, because depending on the financial aid package that you get, private institutions may give you more money than a state school to go. So
we're going to go through that. We'll go through that in a couple of slides. We're going to cover that exact same thing. Yes.
Well, you asked the question, so
That's okay. So we're going to cover the basics right now and go through that. So Craig was just chomping at the bit to get to this, right? So here's the basics. The first thing you need to know, besides FAFSA, is this other acronym. There are a lot of acronyms in this thing, but EFC, which is the Expected Family Contribution. That means once they peel back everything that you put on that FAFSA form, they're going to come back and say, based off the formula, this is what we think your EFC, that expected family contribution, is going to be. And there's a whole package and formula that goes along with it that takes into considerations, your income and what you have and what you need to live on and those type of things. But that's what they use to create that EFC. So it's all the information that you're giving them and telling them. And like we said, for FAFSA, there's some basic information that you have to relay. We'll talk about that. But then that CSS profile, that thing for most private institutions, they get a little bit more detailed. They're going to want to know some things that you don't have to declare on FAFSA, like equity in your home, type of thing. So just be aware. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So yeah, FAFSA doesn't ask you about your retirement accounts or life insurance or any of those types of things. But the CSS profile will ask you about, retirement assets.
They will ask about equity. Retirement can be one of those things. They can ask about it. It gets to be a fine line there in some cases on it, but a lot of times they will. And they may go deeper, like Craig said, in some cases be asking about, cash value in a life insurance contract or something like that. So depending on the institution, they can get very, very detailed. Public institutions, no, they're just going to go by what's on the FAFSA form, and that's where you're going to have to declare and show that. Another reason for looking at public versus private, possibly in terms of that. Again, we're always going to come back to FAFSA. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be something that's going to come up as part of this. All right. So one of the things that's going to come from that are the different types of aid that's available. Right. And you really break it down into two different categories. You've got merit-based, which is those awards, the scholarships, every school is different with that, right? As far as what they're awarding and what they're considering for merit-based. And the reason we bring this up with merit-based is this was the conversation I was trying to have with you, Craig, is about two different schools where one school, your student might be, in the top 10%, but in another school, they might be in the top 25% of those enrolling. And the school may be giving merit-based based on the top 10%, but not on the top 25%. So the idea is that, well, maybe school A, I'm better, everything being equal, I'm better off going there because I've got the possibility I'm going to get more merit aid from that school versus school B.
I mean, there is no rhyme or reason between every school. It's really about, what are they offering for a major? How many people are trying to enroll in those majors in the schools that they're offering? What kind of, academic things have you done that's going to differentiate you from other children in the field so they want you? And you're really trying to create, it's like applying for a position. You want to create, the most appealing student because they want people who are going to be committed and finish.
Yeah. Right. And who are going to, be connected to the school, be part of the community, those type of things. And we'll talk about that with, again, the ethically and moral ways to get into the school of your choice. And then you have needs-based, right? And which need-based fees, fairly self-explanatory, but that's just based on how much you have, what your assets are, and then how that applies to the cost that's there. Fairly standardized with these formulas. Unlike merit-based, like Craig said, there's no real, one school to another could have completely different thresholds on things. Need-based tends to be fairly static in terms of how they're calculating that stuff.
I mean, I've seen kids this year who've gotten full boat packages to schools based on merit. So, whether it be athletic or education,
right,
or academics, yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's the criteria is just different depending on where you go and what the school is. All right, so how the financial need is determined, right? So you've got the accounts, you've got, taxable and non-taxable income, you got the money you put away to retirement, you've got allowances for housing and other things that go into it. And it all sort of adds up, right? So you've got the cost of attending school. That's the tuition, fees, books, all the stuff that goes into that. And then we're going to look at what the parent's income is, and then what the parent's need is off of that income, i.e. what does it mean for you? Because they want to make sure that you can still house yourself and feed yourself, right? Because, they don't want to leave you out in the cold, though it feels that way sometimes based on the conversations with some of these institutions. But that's the factor that they will come in. So that EFC will then, whatever the difference is between the cost of attendance and the expected family contribution, that's the need. All right. And we're going to go through this as Craig was saying, in a more clearer example, like we'll break it down between public and private in a second. But just understand that's what we're talking about here with some of this lowering the cost thing. It's how to fill that gap or figure that gap out with the financial need. Because that's where the cost comes in. That's where this whole, whatever the number is today, because I know it was at like 1.3 trillion as far as student loan debt was concerned, but this enormous number for student loan debt, that that's where it's coming from. It's coming from the financial need. It's not coming from the EFC. It's coming from the gap between what the total cost of attendance is, what the expected family contribution is, and that missing number in between. And this just breaks it down, to what's there. So, right, Craig, you're going, I hate to keep picking on you with this. You're going through this now in clearly, more ways than one with that. But, basically what you're going to get hit with is tuition. And tuition, depending on the school, may not be that big of a number, right? The tuition could be this little tiny number, and then these fees get added in, and suddenly you go from, hey, the tuition was only $2,500, a semester, but the fees were 10 grand on top of that.
Yeah, I haven't seen too much of that manipulation in most of the schools that I looked at, but it is another way where colleges can go, yeah, we're going to give you, we're going to get a full boat tuition. Well,
Yes.
That's great, but I still got to pay for fees and all the other things that are on the menu there, right?
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, UMass, I believe UMass, the tuition this year per semester was $1,750.
Oh my gosh.
Right. Well, no, but that's not the whole in number. The whole in number is 16 grand, but you can see where they make it all up, it's, with all of the stuff that goes in there. But, that's what it is, because they can tell you, oh yeah, we'll give you, we'll give you a percentage off or half off the tuition. Well, the tuition is only, $1,700. They're not giving you a big break there. So here's the example that we're talking about with financial. So let's say we've got A and B. Child's looking at either a state university or a private college. And both of them using the formula for needs-based say that the EFC, that expected family contribution, is going to be $15,000. Okay. So if the state university, the average again for the country is about 22,000, that means the need, that gap, would be 7,000. For a private college, we've gone a little bit upscale, a little bit, not to the high end of the world, but right in that mix there. 60,000, same 15,000 expected family contribution. That means the gap there is 45,000. Now, if you were just looking at this from purely a sticker price standpoint, well, I jumped too fast. See that this is not the actual cost for college. This is just, like the car dealer, right? This is just the sticker price. This is what Craig was talking about. Like this is just what shows up as, hey, look, here's the starting point for all of this. But when we look at that public university, so in the case of the public university, they're not going to give you any, this is like UMass, they're not going to give you any financial or merit award or anything like that. What you can get is an unsubsidized federal loan in the first year. That's $5,500. So you get a student loan, it's unsubsidized, the federal loan, that takes the need down to about $1,500. Again, the gap that's missing, and the cost for that 1 year to the family is really $16,500. Following me, Craig?
I'm following your math. Yes, I am.
There we go. Okay, so cost, yeah, I know. That's why I had you here, because of that. So $16,500 to go to the public university, right? 15,000 expected family contribution and the $1,500 gap. But now when we go to the private institution where we said, wait, that's the 60,000, that means it was 45,000. But like Craig said, the packages that are coming from some of these universities, whether they be merit-based, whether they be athletic-based, whatever the case may be, grants, scholarships, suddenly add up to $45,000, which was the difference that needed to be made up. And now the parents just have the EFC, that expected family contribution. There is no additional gap. There is no other financial need necessary for that. That's what you were trying to say before, correct, right?
Yeah, the people inadvertently will say, well, college, state schools are less expensive, so that's all I'm going to let my child apply to. Well, you really should be applying to everything, because you just don't know, what opportunities are going to be out there based on what they're looking for and what the fit is with your child.
Right, absolutely. And that's part of it, right? Because when you do it all out, the private institution in this particular scenario, and, again, everything is you got to do apples to apples in terms of comparing schools and everything. But in this particular scenario, you would pay $1,500 less to go to the $60,000 private institution than you would have to go to the $22,000 state school. So as Craig said, it's just something that needs to be looked at, and you can't just, as he said, narrow the field down, right? So you got to really be thinking about, what you're applying to, how you're applying, when you're applying. And so this is that, as Craig said, don't eliminate the high sticker prices. Don't let that scare you off. If they come back and say, we're not giving you any aid, just so you know, that's for those, yes, for those fans of what is that, the Providence, right? The Providence College. Yeah, they won't give you anything. So that sticker price is the sticker price. That's what you're going to deal with. So in those situations, then you're backing off unless that's where you really wanted to go, in which case you're going to have to deal with a whole lot of other things. But for a lot of those higher priced, sticker priced private colleges, there is the possibility that you will get a substantial scholarship grant program to bring the cost down into something that's either close or possibly less expensive than the state school.
And a couple of things, I don't know if you're going to get back to FASBA on this one, but I just wanted to mention it before I forget.
Sure.
Is that one thing you want to be doing is, saving on the cost of college based on the FASBA and the CSS profile. Make some conscious decisions if you can about what deductions or what income you're going to have, that year or two before college.
Oh yeah, no, that comes up later.
Okay.
Yeah, no. We're going to get into all of that because that's part of it, right? And the whole planning and what you're going to do and how you're going to do that, and some of the ways around some of that expected family contribution. Yes. Yeah, we'll definitely get into that in terms of going through it. Not that, yeah. Yes, it's on there. Like I said, FAFSA keeps coming up and it will keep coming up, right? But, so why the private colleges are doing this, right, is the fact that, they're trying to compete. They know that the state school is less expensive, so they got to figure out some way to make themselves at least look somewhat attractive, because they're trying to pull from the same pool of students that the lower priced, state college or university is trying to pull from. It's their money, right? They make the rules because unlike the state schools, they're governed under certain, governance. They have rules set in place about what they can do, what they can offer, how they can operate, those sort of things. A private institution is their money. They're making the rules. Their endowments are generating that income for them that they are able to then distribute out. And they possibly, and I know probably do, have more of an endowment than the state institution does. That's why Harvard owns half of New Zealand, which I still don't understand, but that's okay. It's one of those things. All right, so the different types of financial aid offers that do come in, right, they are not all the same, but the number one that you want to get, right, are grants and scholarships, right, because those are, you don't have to pay them back.
Free
right,
money.
Greg?
Free money. We like free
Free
money.
money. Yeah, free money. Free money is the best kind of money, and you can quote me on that. Then you have work study. Yes, you have loans. We'll talk about the loans in a little bit. But they come from different places, right? So they come from the federal, they come from state, the different scholarships, different offers, and they come from the colleges themselves. So you want to sort of we can't say that enough to families and to students, to be applying and searching and looking for as many different opportunities for scholarship money, merit-based, athletic-based, whatever it might be that's available and out there, because all of that is free money. And that's going to lower that cost and fill in, if there is that gap, that there won't have to be that reaching for either additional funding or loans.
Yeah, absolutely. So much money is left on the table when it comes to this too, Tom, because there are so many different types of grants and scholarships out there that you can apply for. I mean, and it may not be huge. It may be a couple $100 here, a few $100 there, but it all adds up. And it's just a matter of taking the time to fill out the applications and do the reports and just turn that in. And like I said, so much of it goes unclaimed is because people just don't bother.
Right. Right. And that is a big part of it. And it does take a little bit of time, does take a little bit of effort. Believe me, I know. As I said, I've been going through this for 6 years now. I still have 2 more years to go, in terms of coaxing and getting them to apply and do all the things they need to do. And see, in the case of some of this aid, there's ongoing responsibility. It's sort of a requalifying process where the child either has to maintain a certain grade level, has to reapply FAFSA. I've got to file FAFSA every year. And I've been, like I said, been doing it for 6 years now, and I've got 2 more to go. So I'm going to continue to do it. Craig and I sort of bounce back and forth. Like after October 1st, we're texting each other like, did you do your FAFSA yet? Did you take care of that? So just something to remember. It's a process. There is effort, but the reward ultimately is the lower cost and less money being paid out. So some of the secrets to reducing these costs, this is sort of the buildup for everything. So like we said, and as Craig just said, free money, right? So the idea here is can we get as much of the free money as we possibly can qualify for? And, that's looking at those merit-based scholarships. We just talked about that. Need-based financial aid, if you don't file FAFSA, you're never going to know. You can't get any of that financial aid or any of that stuff without filing FAFSA. So that's the number one takeaway. If we don't say it 5 more times, I'm going to be surprised in terms of going through this, but that's the idea. Cheap money, those are those federal subsidized loans, right? So that's the thing that's been put on pause. This is what you hear with all of that, with every time they talk about, the student loan has been, my daughter's been through the roof with that because she's got some of these subsidized federal loans. Like they just paused it again. I go, well, you're plowing more money into the savings so that you can pay it off once it all comes back due, right? In terms of going through that. But private loans, no.
Real quick, why don't you tell the difference between a subsidized and a non-subsidized loan?
Right. So, in going through that part of it just means that you're on the hook for a certain period of time, right? In terms of dealing with the subsidized loans and going through it. Unsubsidized, it's your word, basically. You're just there, and there's nothing really holding them in terms of going through that.
Well, the subsidized loan is actually, you're not paying interest while you're in college.
Right.
The government's paying that piece. On a non-subsidized loan, the interest is accumulating the entire time you're in school. And sometimes you actually have the option to pay the interest while you're going through, so you don't have a bigger principal when you get out.
Right, as far as being hit with it at the end, and then you can roll them up from there if you choose to, in terms of going through it.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Right, and going through that. And then you've got those, like we talked about, the shortfalls, so that's where it's filling in, like, all right, we've used some or all of what we were expecting to pay for this expected family contribution, our college savings, whatever we put away. But now we need other money. And this is where it sort of gets into, maybe it's family members. We deal with a lot, right, Craig, where equity lines and equity, home loans, those type of things get used. Like you talked about, borrowing for college is different.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about good and bad debt, and college debt being good debt because you're using it to get yourself into a better position later in life. You're going to have there is absolutely a correlation between the amount of education that you have and your salary later on. So that's why we correlate to this being good debt from that perspective.
Right. And then you have private loans, which again are different than federal. The rates, depending, can be lower in some cases, but some of this, the waiver and some other things don't apply to private loans. So anybody with private loans right now have not been paused. You're still paying private loans versus the federal loans. A plus loan, that's a parent loan. That's where you're on there as the primary, essentially. The only reason that we ever might suggest this with it might be with older parents, not to wish ill will on anyone, but one of the things with a plus loan is that upon death or disability to the parent, it gets waived. The loan goes away. So one of those things that does happen with a plus loan. So if you're a younger parent, that's not necessarily going to be in your best interest because you're going to probably carry this thing. And we have these conversations too with people into their 50s and 60s carrying some of this debt.
Just so you know, the free money too. Some people ask me, where do these grants and scholarships come from? Go to your guidance counselor at the high school. A lot of times you'll have a lot of sources of different scholarships that you can apply for.
Yeah, and like Craig said, there's literally thousands of them. And depending on what you're trying to, some of them get very, very specific. If you're going to veterinary school or you're in Massachusetts or whatever, can get very, very specific. But that just, whittles down who's actually applying. That's why Craig said for a lot of this, the stuff gets left on the table because one, they didn't either know it or didn't find it in time to apply for it. Some of them have deadlines in terms of the application of when you can put that in and apply for coverage.
The other piece too here is work study. Sometimes that'll be rolled into the package with a school as part of the whole package.
Right.
It allows them to make a little money while they're at school to help pay for school, but it's guaranteed work that they're going to make at least this much. They could make more. And it's really easy work. I mean, it's basically they're working and studying at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is a good point. It was brought up in the other screen that work study is one of those options that are available and that can be used. And again, like Craig said, it can go to apply to lessen that overall cost. So could close the gap down on it. And clearly the idea is that you're looking for strategies that are going to increase the free money versus take on anything else, because that's where the debt comes in. And that's where the gap happens. So this is what Craig was talking about. See, I brought the slide in for you. This is it, in terms of, so the idea with financial aid, right, is you want to make any of these moves, and we'll call it that because I don't want to get too deep into some of that stuff. We'll go into the assets themselves in a little bit, because we always get asked that question: where can I hide money? How can I hide this money, or what can I do to get around that type of thing, right? So one of the things that you can do, right, if you're not fully maxing out your retirement contributions, you can max out your retirement contribution for a given year, because that will reduce your income. Retirement, like Craig said, is not looked at on a FAFSA form. So increasing the amount that's going into your retirement plan will help, but you've got to do it before you file your, because if it's in the year that you're actually applying, they will look at that as a problem, right? So you've got to have done that the year prior to making the application done is the issue there.
A little bit of forethought there.
Yes. Go ahead.
The other thing too is, let's say if you have investments that are getting capital gains, you may want to parlay those for that year. So you're adding to your income. Like look at those types of things that are going to add to your income that are going to make it, increase your family contribution.
Right.
But have a talk with your accountant ahead of time.
Yes. But also be understanding everything that's needed. So, I got to tell you, 6 years in with FAFSA at this point, I'm fairly confident in terms of going through and I have everything down in front of me when I'm doing it, but I know I still end up, wait a minute, I needed this thing, or it's going to ask me for that type of thing. So it's just going through and having that. And then when you're looking at the schools will actually give you some of that indicator. Here's what we give for aid. Here's what we've awarded in the last year type of thing. They do have that available to sort of give you an indication of what that's going to mean for you. And so, it's more of this, as Craig said, this forethought, this planning, be prepared, have it in place, understand some of the rules to doing it. Because otherwise, if you don't, and then you try to move it, then it's just going to cost you anyway. And they're going to be like, wait, you just moved that. Sorry, that's going to count for you in this particular year. It's like the cost, you put the money into the retirement plan, but they're like, well, yeah, but it's taxable income for you for this year. We're going to count that against you. So you didn't hide it. You didn't protect it in that situation. All right. So one of the things with it is also this whole thing about gifting money. Like, the Nana wants to be a good soul and give money to Johnny for school. The problem is if the money goes into Johnny's name, it counts worse than if it's in your name, right? And what might be a better situation is to have Nana hang on to the money, because then it doesn't get looked at, it doesn't get counted. And then once Johnny gets out of school, then maybe say, wait, why don't we do this and have that gift come in? Because then if there is a student loan, a federal loan or anything like that, that gift can then be used to pay for that particular situation instead of gifting the money up front.
Right, because some people will say, could I put it into a 529? But you can't use money from a 529 account, college savings account, to pay student debt.
No.
You can only use it for the cost of college. So.
Right. Yeah, we'll talk about 529s in a little bit, because 529s still count against you. So just understand that that's an asset. It's an asset in your name, though not the child's name. And we'll get into that a little bit. It's better to have stuff in your name than in their name, because that will be looked at. But in this case, for grandparents, really the idea there would be to have the grandparents have opened a 529 for little Johnny. Because any money in a 529 that's in Nana's name does not count against little Johnny. Because it's only Johnny's immediate family, i.e. parents and siblings, that count against Johnny. So money sitting in Nana's 529 counts against Nana and not against Johnny.
You can do this, just don't wait till after college to use it, that's all.
No. You can, 529 can then pay for Johnny's education. There will be a little bit of an impulse, a little bit of a take back on it because of the paying for that college tuition, but it won't count against it.
No, it won't count against. I'm just saying you can't use the 529 after he's out of college.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear that. Yeah, that is correct. Right. You got that.
Earlier statement.
Yeah, no, you can't use it to pay for the loans or any of those costs, right? In terms of dealing with all of that. So we take a look at a couple, and the idea here is that really this is just an example of saying that if the couple was able to increase their contributions to their retirement accounts, they did it prior to the year that the child was then going to be applying, they would actually be bringing down their household income to a level that would say, wait a minute, now we're not into this extraordinary high, income family, that we fall under what is for the regular world, the simplified EFC calculation. And, it ends up saving them additional dollars, but also lets them put more money into their retirement account, because that's one way to hide, using that term loosely, hide those assets, right? Because like Craig said, there might be some private institutions out there that may ask you about your retirement account balances.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how they weight them, but they will ask.
Yes. Right. So again, going back, because we're always looking for free money, again, it's merit-based scholarships, it's tuition discounts, because if we're talking about higher earners, you're not going to qualify for needs-based, right? But for those gaps in there, it's maybe you are able to put a little bit more away. Maybe there's some strategies to use with grandparents or others that can help with that. Maybe like Craig said, there is some tax crediting strategies that can go on that you can be using to offset some of that cost as well. So just know, one of the things with this, and I think the reason we bring it up is as Craig had mentioned before, and again, coming back to FAFSA with that, and we'll talk about FAFSA again in a second, is that everybody should apply. And we'll go through that in a second with it, because that's one of the things. But just know it doesn't matter no matter how much you think you earn, no matter how much you think you have, everybody should fill that FAFSA form out.
Thing I can say is no.
Right.
They give you something.
Yeah. So I'm not going to go through this. It's a little hard to read and go through it, but it's just about, trying to figure out and go through the details and everything with it. Really not worth trying to figure out all that's on there. It's a little bit too wordy, right? So again, when we're dealing with, that higher cost, that higher there, so this is the idea of I'm going to make my child independent, right? Because I'm now going to say my child's independent, and I'm going to avoid some of this by letting them become independent for everything, and possibly then gift them the cost or gift them some of the money in terms of dealing with it. And
wouldn't declare them as dependent on your taxes anymore. That's how you do that, right?
Right. And as Craig said, that's some of that, getting around some of it. The student ends up, especially if you're high earner, you don't get the education tax credit. The child would then be eligible for the education tax credit. The gift would be within the gift tax limit because both parents can gift to them, and you sort of get around some of that. Now you have certain parameters. Again, we're trying to play within the white lines here and be in the sandbox for it. About how the child is sustaining themselves and going through it, if they're a full-time student and those type of things. So you got a little bit of wiggle room in there.
I had a request to speak louder, Tom.
Oh, sorry.
It's not coming from me. So
Yeah, no. I thought I was losing my voice there for a second. So. Again, high income families, if you're writing a check, right, sometimes that's taking, I'm selling an asset, which means I could get not only hit with, hey, I'm paying for this thing, but now I also have a capital gain that might be due because I'm selling an appreciated asset. I've got too much money. I'm phased out of those educational tax credit. And, it's unfortunate that I end up paying more probably than what that closer to the actual sticker price.
And my apologies. I was supposed to speak louder, not you. You can quiet down now.
That would be it. See, there you go. See, now I know why I'm getting in trouble. All right. So, part of this is looking at it and saying, I'm trying to build up the funds for college. I'm trying to, my savings for retirement. You don't want to be impacting your monthly cash flow. And this, Craig, we talk to families all the time with about, how are you taking care of that? And one of the biggest things I think for us that we talk to everybody about isn't really about how you're saving your money, but it's about how you're spending your money.
Well, true. I mean, especially if you're going to be doing some of this, out of your cash flow, as opposed to money you already have saved or something along those lines. So you may have to change your budget, especially in the short term, to help you do that out of cash flow, if that's where it's going to come from.
Yeah. And then it's like, all right, so now how are the assets affected, or how are they looked at? How are they dealt with? All the different types. And Craig mentioned the 529 plans. So we'll start with those in terms of going through it. But, and I know this is kind of tough to see, and it's in a green and red thing, but it's supposed to be good, bad, green is good, red is bad in terms of the light, and going through that. So just reading them down on the screen there, you've got the Coverdell, the education savings IRAs, you got cash, 529s, Roths, traditional IRAs, retirement accounts, EE savings bonds, zero coupon bonds, municipal bonds, growth stocks, and then fixed annuities. And it sort of fills in and says, does one of them have a rate of return or give you any type of rate of return? Do you get tax deferred growth, tax favored for access for college, and then favorable for financial aid? That would be the fourth column over from the left. And that's really the one to sort of look at. Favorable for financial aid, you've got 4 green boxes: Coverdell IRAs, 529s, retirement accounts, and fixed annuities. Those are all favorable for financial aid because they are in either a parent's name or in the case of retirement accounts and annuities, they are off the books as far as FAFSA is concerned. Everything else shows up except for those. So understand that if you've got money, you can see cash is the worst, right? Cash is just red all the way through. It says having money in cash does you no good because it's just an asset that's looked at and it doesn't matter. It's just that there is no, tax favor. There's no real growth in it. It's just having cash doesn't really work in terms of dealing with this. But everything else, you've got some goods and some bads, some pros and some cons about it. And so, Craig mentioned them and we'll talk a little bit, 529. So traditional college savings plans, 529 accounts. These are you, the parent, or as we talked about, possibly Nana, is the owner. Your child or grandchild in that situation is the beneficiary. So when they look at it and say what's in there, that's you as the owner or Nana, and it does not count as the child's money because they are just the beneficiary to this account. They can be changed. Right, Craig?
Absolutely. So it doesn't necessarily, if that child doesn't use it, you can move it on to the next child or next grandchild or another family member, whatever works. Yep.
Now, one of the things with 529s, interesting little thing is that some states give you a tax break. Now, it is a state tax break. It is not federal. It is on your state tax. The state of Massachusetts has had it for a couple of years now. They just, silently let people know. There wasn't any fanfare or any, big to-do about it. But since 2017, they've offered a tax break. It's up to $2,000, $1,000 per adult per child that can contribute will get a tax break from the state of Massachusetts.
And
Go ahead.
One vehicle you left off the chart here was cash value in a life insurance policy. Is also not looked at for college.
Right. So
one of the vehicles is not on the list. That's all.
Yeah. No, and that is true. That is a vehicle that is available. A lot of times with the cash value of a life insurance contract, though, when we're talking about individuals who are sophomores, juniors, seniors in high school, it's not really that applicable if you don't already have a plan in place type of thing.
Oh, right. I'm just saying if you have a policy on the parent and there's cash value or the grandparent,
right,
cash value,
right,
that's not counted against them when they do fast.
Yep. No, that is correct. One of the things with 529s, we do now have the 529A, the ABLE accounts. So one of the things with ABLE, for any of those who had opened 529 traditional college savings plans that we're talking about now, and the child is not going to go to college, to secondary education, those 529s can be transferred to an ABLE account with no penalty. There's no tax consequences, no penalty. There's a free roll from 529 college savings to an ABLE account, should you already have the ABLE account open for your son or daughter. So just one of those little things, besides the tax break, that secondary sort of, hey, but just in case you had opened one and the child's not going to go, not this, hey, I'm going to take it back. What can I do with it if I don't have another beneficiary? Right, Craig?
Yeah, and going back, to the special needs part of what we do here, a lot of parents I see will forego putting money into a 529 because they're not sure what their child's abilities are going to be later on. And because they're able now, I think that's a mistake. I think you should, if you think there's any chance they're going to go, put that money away. And then if they can't use it for college, they can use it for themselves later on.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just one of those to be thinking about. So, the 529 is always propped up as the end all be all for college savings, not necessarily a fit for everyone, not necessarily depending on the circumstances. And that's why we sort of talk to families about that, about what might make sense. Really, for those who are, again, sophomores, juniors, seniors, that's sort of already played out. You either put the money in there and it's there, or you haven't done it and there's no reason to be starting that now because you're just never going to get that makeup happening. So what you want to lose is figure out the ways that you can get around some of this and lower some of those costs, those tuition costs. Like, so, some of the processes to go through with this, right, and to look at it, I know, believe me, I'm a guy, like I said, I've been doing this for 6 years now straight, and it's still a little overwhelming to deal with. But there is a process to go through, and there are steps in place and things that you can do to help sort of identify some of these, right? The FAFSA, obviously, we talked about the whole idea of going through and finding it, coming up with some of the different ideas as far as going through it. But specifically looking at the differences between schools, like Craig said, apply to as many as you possibly can, or that fit for your criteria. I sort of say, find the middle ground, sort of that this is a school I'd really like to attend. I don't know if you did this with your kids, Craig, but find a school I really want to attend, find a layup, find one you're going to get into, and then find that 2 or 3 stretch schools that you might want to apply to.
We did all that and more. Yes.
Craig has been having fun with his youngest daughter and choosing schools. So in case you can't tell.
Oh yeah, it's been great. But she's chosen, so I'm thrilled. So that's all.
Oh, there you go. Nice.
Yeah, she's going to American University. That's the choice.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I'm like you said, I think the biggest mistake people make is not applying for FAFSA, just assuming they're not going to get anything, right? I think the other thing you got to take into consideration a little bit now too, if you're on a budget and you're worried about trying to pay for school, is return on investment, right? How expensive is the school? Do you really need to go to the $25,000, $30,000 a year school, or would the state school suffice? If it's more in your budget. And if it takes you longer than 4 years to graduate for financial reasons, then that's what it takes, right? So don't get overwhelmed by that, but don't inadvertently, like you said earlier, pay for the 5th year of school due to poor planning.
Right.
Make sure you get those credits in, even if you got to take it maybe over our summer course or something like that, so you don't have to pay for an entire whole year.
Yeah, and one of them for a lot of kids who are this is why it says choosing the wrong school or curriculum, sort of picking up what Craig was talking about there, right? So, one of the biggest things now, and I think it's definitely an overlooked alternative and an overlooked route to use is community colleges.
Oh, absolutely.
Massachusetts has there are 15 community colleges in the state of Massachusetts. So there's a robust network of community colleges here where, for someone who is not sure, isn't quite clear on the path they want to choose or what they want to do, going for a year or two to a community college, figuring out, sort of the course of where they want to go, and then applying to that 4-year for degree school, absolutely is a pathway where you're lowering the expenses, significantly in dealing with that.
Yeah, I'm a product of that myself. I didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid. I paid for school myself, and I went to community college. The nice part about that too is once you're in, it's easier to get into a community college, and once you're in, all the state schools will typically accept you.
Right.
I know in Massachusetts they have a rule where they actually all your credits will transfer over to the next college, and now you can continue to go do your 4-year or beyond. So it's definitely a path to save some money.
Yeah, and especially if we're talking about, this is why it says choosing the wrong school or curriculum is one of those things, because if the child really is not committed or not sure, it's an opportunity to get some of the experience, to get some of that guidance and pathway to finding where they want to go, without paying the $40,000 or $50,000, cost or whatever it ends up being as far as that EFC number for you. And then the other is the lost financial aid. That's just not taking the time and effort to go through and find those scholarships or grants that might be available. And, for some of it, like Craig said, and, with a lot of families that we deal with, my own family involved as well, I wanted my kids to have a little skin in the game. So they've got federal loans that they've got to deal with that, as far as that part of it, but it was just their as part of their skin in the game. I wanted them to be aware of it. They know what the rules are. They've got the payback all set up on it.
Right. And then that's, like I said, every family's got a different way to do it. I mean, I know another way that, I almost did when I was then is the GI Bill, another way to get money to pay for school. So the issue is there's lots and lots of ways to pay for school. The first two may be the ones you want, and the other 8 or 9, 10 ways to do it may not be as favorable to you. But the issue is you got to look at the end result. The end result is you have a college degree, and once you have it, no one can take that away from you.
Absolutely. And like you said, that's one of those that we call, or consider good debt. And so, like we said, we're beating this up a little bit, but the idea here is that everybody should apply. And that means everybody should complete the FAFSA for your child. I don't care how much money you make. That's mistake number one, thinking you make too much money or not understanding the formulas, like how that's all calculated, picking the wrong schools. We just sort of talked about that's where, maybe it's a parent wanting the kid to go to their alma mater when the kid is not a fit or wanting to do that, right? So, just understand that there's a part in all of this that really sort of tries to connect all those pieces for everybody. And this comes back to FAFSA. This is what Craig was talking about making sure that everybody applies. That it is just that basic of a thing. I told you we'd say it 5 more times, right? So that's what's where at. It's like, or the Beetlejuice, right? With that, but it is. If you take nothing else away, just know that October 1st, the FAFSA window is going to open. If your child is going to be in any type of secondary, college, university study in 2023, you want to apply for FAFSA, for the free application for financial student aid. All right, so the last one here is with, these ethical ways. This came about because of the whole, scandal with the bribery and trying to get kids into school, right? So like Craig said, they're looking for students that are engaged, right? And that just may be like you've got an interest in the school. The SAT, ACT testing, that's sort of, wobbling back and forth here in terms of, with COVID, some of the schools were waiving that as a criteria. I don't know if you ran into that, Craig, but, I know some of the schools were waiving the criteria on it.
A lot of them were. It was optional.
Right.
So, yep.
So we'll see where that goes and where that comes out, but we talked about that broad range of schools. Right. And it's not so much just a broad range of schools that are local. When we say broad range of schools, we may go outside of a, say, 200-mile radius, because the more you go outside of that radius, the more you're an unknown or wanted quantity. You're now not part of their pool of applicants that they're getting on a regular basis. You're somebody who's different. And so you become, as Greg said, a little bit more of an uptick or a little bit more of a wanted student to a school that might be outside of a certain parameter to you.
Well, all schools want diversity, right? And so if you don't want 50 kids from the same high school, that's not diversity, right? So like you said, sometimes applying to an out-of-state school, something like 200 or 300 miles away makes it more favorable because all those kids from that state aren't applying to that college. So it gives you that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that's on there, you got to face it, it's a reality. Social media, if you're posting, they're going to look at it, just so you know. They're going to look at all your social media. So be careful with your social media. Make sure you're not doing anything that's outlandish or crazy or, insensitive in any way, shape, or form. That's just standard operating procedure for everybody.
You wouldn't want to see it on the news that night. Don't put it on the Facebook page, right?
Involve parents, right? Parents involve the student. Make sure it's a discourse. It's a conversation that's happening amongst you, so that you're all coming to it. The feelings and what they're looking for. It's like I said, my younger is at UMass Amherst. She didn't want to be in the city. We're not going to be comfortable trying to put her in a college or university that was in the city setting. Wasn't in her mind where she wanted to be. So if I was trying to do that, it would have absolutely failed her. So you got to have that discourse with the child, be organized, like we talked about, the forms, the necessary things. I know I don't remember what those do. You just went through it, Craig, that whole, what is it, Naviance? What is that thing?
Oh, yeah, right. And the college boards. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's nice because you do FAFSA once and all the schools have access to it. So you're not doing it for every single school they apply to.
Right. But so all of that stuff, and then like Craig said, most high schools or high schools, you've got guidance counselors and ways to go through that and help you get through that in terms of guidance and all of that stuff. But it's important to be organized with it.
Right.
And from parents, you don't, while you do want to put it on the child to have the child, be active in doing it, but you also want to put a little bit of a checklist on there to make sure that that stuff's being done, so that you don't get to the last minute and then realize, wait, the applications were due tomorrow and nothing's been done yet.
Yeah, in this case, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? You want to be on top of everything.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you haven't saved for college, saving on college means you need to really be on your game now. So.
Yeah. And absolutely, and that's part of what we try to do. Craig and I, we understand the road zigs and zags, so what we try to do with every family is try to help them sort of plot out that road ahead, avoid some of the potholes, some of the speed bumps that are going to come up along the way. The way we do that is we put together what we call a roadmap to financial awesomeness. This is a visual tool that just gives you an overview of where you're at, where you can be, some of the pieces that might be in place, some of the pieces that you might want to not have in place when dealing with this. And, for anybody who's interested, we offer it as a complimentary consultation because you sat through the webinar this evening. It's something we do with the Schools for Children. All you got to do is type yes into the chat box. Craig, you got the link?
In the chat box right now, my friend.
So you can tell he's done this once or twice, right? So Craig just dropped the link in there. That's a scheduler. If you want to copy and paste it, or if you just click on it, it's going to open a calendar and you can book a time that we can have a conversation. We'll just answer any of the questions that you might have, what's important to you, what you're trying to figure out, and then see if this makes sense for you. One of the other things that we do offer is we have this guidebook. It's pretty much a walkthrough of some of the topics that we talked about here, which is just how to save thousands on the cost of a college education. So it sort of sums up a lot of this webinar. And if you're more of a reader than you are a visual person, it's a nice little tool. But you can shoot an email to us, or you can reach out to either Nina or Denise, and they can let us know, and we can get that over to you. This is Greg and I in our more formal attire. Yes, those are TB12 jerseys, and God bless, not only did he retire and then unretire, but now Fox has offered him like $1 bazillion to be a sportscaster once he stops playing football. We will retire the jerseys at that point. We kept them because he's the greatest of all time, even though he went to Tampa. We do some presentations, some workshops in those jerseys. We're out and about with them. They custom, they say Moody Street on the back. They don't say Brady. But then he retired, and like Craig and I didn't know what to do for all of 3 or 4 days. Then he unretired, and we said, okay, we'll go one more season and we'll figure out whether Mac Jones is the thing or not. We need to update those jerseys. But that's our contact information from there. And now we come to the Q&A part. So if there are questions, please feel free. I don't know, Denise or Nina, that's you guys are going to take over at this point, or what do we want to do?
Sure, I'm happy to just share the questions with you. This is Denise. The first question we have is, how would you declare independence for FAFSA later on? I can never say that.
Yeah, no, I know it's tough, right? So it's one of those that FAFSA things. So that's a tax thing, right? You're deciding not to claim your child as a dependent on you. That's what Craig said, and that's
just so you know, I know the person who asked. They're most of the audience is students tonight, and this person does her own FAFSA because her parents are immigrants who don't do FAFSA. So she's asking how does she declare independence so that she can then not have to involve the family at all next year, basically.
Right. So then you would just be claimed. You would not be claimed as as a dependent on your parents' tax return. You would then say, when you're filing your tax return, I'm an independent. Nobody claims me as a dependent. They would not be claiming you anymore. That's a conversation with the parents to do that.
But you would be turning your own tax return into FAFSA, but not the parents. And I know there's a space on there, but I don't have the forms up in front of me, so I can't tell you exactly where. But I mean, I did it myself when I was 18. So
Yeah. I mean, it is that basic of a thing where it's you're filing your own tax return. Now you're an independent. You are no longer claimed as a dependent by your parents.
Thank you. Another question that came to us very early. How much financial aid do you need? Do you need a lot of it? Do you need a little of it?
That really depends on where you go, right? So just like we said, depending on the school, if in the case of that private university that I described in the example, the 60,000, well, if they didn't give you that 45,000 after that expected family contribution of 15, they only gave you 15, then you'd need $30,000 more you'd have to come up with from someplace. So it depends on what that expected family contribution is going to be, and then what's the gap and how much they're going to give you for aid. In that scenario, the one I gave you, they were giving you $45,000 of financial aid. They were pretty much filling in the gap. Doesn't happen in most cases. Most cases, it's a percentage of that. Usually about somewhere between, Craig, what was your experience? Like 40 to 60% of that.
the expected family contribution?
No. The financial aid coming from the institution.
Oh yeah, it was definitely. I didn't see too many that weren't at least 40%. So.
Right. But not the whole 100% package like we described in the example.
Well, like I said, I've seen people who have gotten 100%.
Yeah. No, it can
that's
happen, sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Another question for you guys. Thank you for that answer. Can you clarify how a 529 differs from a Coverdell education savings account when people are trying to save for college?
Sure. So Coverdell was originally called an education IRA. Just a real, obviously I'm old, so I still remember the education IRAs. So education IRAs, they had limit. They could only put in like I think originally it was like $250. Then it went to $500. They changed the rule, called them Coverdells, to allow you to put up to $2,000 into it. I don't know if it's changed since then, Greg, but that's what I had as the last number, as I remember, that you could put away $2,000. It's essentially like an IRA is how it operates, this Coverdell. But it's limited in terms of how much you can put away. The 529 decided to change that and say, we're going to open, we understand the cost of college is skyrocketed through the roof here. So now we're going to say you can just put money away in this thing. And I think Fidelity's through the MIFA, the 529 here in Massachusetts, it's like 400,000 is the limit you can put into that thing. So there's some tax rules that go along with it in terms of gifting and getting money in there, but there really isn't a limit on what can be put in. Whereas a Coverdell, it's limited to how much money can go in on an annual basis.
Coverdell also becomes the child money when they turn the age of majority.
Age of majority, there you go. Another good point with that. So then when financial aid, again, better to have money in parents' name versus if we're dealing with mostly students here, than in your name. Money in your name counts against you higher than it does against your parents.
You do have a question in the chat box, just to let you know.
Yes. You okay? I wasn't sure if you were able to see that. Okay.
Do you want me to ask it, or
whatever you want to do?
Marina says, I'm guessing that most students claiming themselves as independent qualify for a lot of aid. It's as simple as parents not claim. If it's as simple as parents not claiming them, why wouldn't more college students do that?
Well, there's a lot of reasons.
Go ahead.
This one? Okay. I was just going to say there's a lot of reasons. Number one, if you're looking to get college loans to cover the difference, because sometimes the child isn't working, they have no work history, they have no credit history. So it makes getting a student loan more difficult. So that could be one big reason. It could be a matter of, what assets does a child have versus what the parents have. So there could be lots of different reasons why this necessarily isn't the best way to go.
But don't you also have to prove yourself as like, you've paid for all of your
Yeah, how can you be
expenses? Like, it's
independent if you have
not
no
like you
income?
just file and say, oh, I'm independent. You have to actually support yourself as an independent individual.
Like
So
colleges
let's just say, wait, we're just going to put the white lines down again. We're trying to be in the playing field here. That you have to say that you are responsible for at least half of your overall well-being, i.e. housing, food, your living expenses. You have to put that and say, I am responsible for that. Whether somebody's going to check on it is a completely different conversation and not something we're going to get into here, but just know you are stating that as far as the form is concerned to say, yes, I am responsible for more than 50% of my overall, basic housing needs and expenses and everything else.
One thing you got to remember too is that this is competitive. I mean, if you look at the amount of people who apply to different colleges and get into different colleges, it is a competitive situation, and colleges want only people who are going to be successful, but who can also pay their bill. So it's another reason why you may not want to try to take some kind of a unethical. I'm going to say it's unethical if you are actually supporting yourself, but these little hatches, these colleges know all these things. They do it all day long. So they know what to look for. And if you put yourself in that kind of a situation, it'll just pass you by and you won't get in. So you want to be as ethical and honest as you possibly can. But, as my accounting teacher used to say, there's, fine line between, avoiding taxes and evading taxes. One's legal, one's illegal, right? We want to stay on the legal side of this equation. So.
Yep.
When you were talking about the private versus public, I was thinking, do Ivies still give like a free education to families making under a certain amount? And does that only include tuition? Or is that room and board and fees as well? Do you know? At some point they were doing that, but.
Well, go ahead, Greg.
I was just asking the question, first part of the question, you're talking about Ivy League schools?
Yeah.
So I know I have had experience with clients who've been in that situation where the child did qualify and basically got into Harvard on a free ride, essentially. But you have to be that student, right? Like this, the kid was, exceptional student, he checked all the boxes basically. So the parents were just under the threshold. They just, under Harvard's, whatever their limit is, what they call it. I'm sure theirs is different, but I believe every Ivy League school has a different criteria for that. I don't know if they're still doing it now. It's COVID again. This was a couple of years ago.
Right.
I don't know if COVID's changed.
I'm not sure if it's still happening. I
know
at some point it was 30,000 or less. I know at some point it was 50,000 or less was the cutoff.
Yeah, no, I had run into that. I'd seen that before as well. But like I said, I don't have experience with it now. We're in the post-pandemic world here.
Your point, Nina, if you're getting into an Ivy League school because you're that desired as a student, if the Ivy League isn't giving you that package, another school may. And it may not be Ivy, but it could be something just below, right? And a lot of fantastic schools out there. So keep your options open.
And also, like you were saying, if you're a poorer student trying to get into an Ivy and you actually have the qualifications to get in, then you're poorer than you would be in a state school. Right, so they're going to give you more money because, relatively speaking, you need more money, right? So that's the.
No, and that works the same scale. That's why we say, don't think, oh, my parents make all this money or they have all of this stuff. Like, relatively speaking, that depends on who you're applying against, right? So, like we talked about with the cost of Brown or Providence College. Providence College is like $75,000 a year, by the way. So, it's another one. That's like crazy. That where, yeah. So, but the other families that are applying might be 2-3 times the stuff and income that you have. So you may be on the lower end. You don't feel it. You don't think it. That's why we say, do the application, the FAFSA application, and apply to schools that you think would be a good fit for you, and then see what comes back for the offers. Because that's another part of it. You can play some of those schools off each other. Like, I'm getting a better deal over here. Why can't you match this type of thing?
The best thing you can do is make yourself as desirable to the schools as possible. Get your grades up. And the other thing too, we even talk about is AP classes. Sometimes you can get college credits before you even get to school by taking college type courses in high school. So, but like I said, make yourself presentable, take your time, do your essays, reach out to the schools, show interest, and just try to make yourself, get yourself as high up on that list as you can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Craig. As always, this was a wonderful presentation and an opportunity for us to learn an awful lot and to finance, for many of us, financial stuff can be really scary. I'm putting my hand up. I'm one of those folks, and you make it so accessible. So thank you so much for doing that for us. So
yeah, absolutely.
So I just want to make sure everyone knows we have one more session in our Smart Money series. It's going to be this Thursday, the 12th. We also want to, and we've got the, where you're able to register. Our last one is on credit score and making sure that you've got your credit in order for financial success. Because that is really key. Like these gentlemen will tell us, very key for financial success.
Credit score matters, absolutely. Your credit score matters. You got to take care of it. Yeah.
We also want to make sure you know that I'm hoping that Craig and Tom will be back with us in September. You can pre-register today for our September 24th virtual college and career fair, part of the Different Choices work that we're doing, this project. You can go to differentchoices.org, learn about September 24th, and then a couple of days afterwards, we're going to be doing a couple more presentations, and also check out Schools for Children. Schools for Children, where you had a chance to hear from our executive director. We really work hard to make sure that each student is considered quite special. They're the center of their education. We really work very hard to make sure that we are providing transformational education for students and for their families. So it's 7:59. I again want to thank Craig, want to thank Tom, and hope that they'll be back. I want to make sure folks know that we have been taping, we've been recording the session this evening. It will be available on our YouTube channel within a few days. Thank you for coming, and we hope you'll be back on Thursday, and we hope you'll continue to work with us through Different Choices. There are amazing amounts of resources, information. We've got events like this one, specifically for folks for students with IEPs, 504s, and or mental health challenges, social emotional differences. And have a great evening.
Have a great evening,
Thank
everybody.
you, guys. Always a pleasure.
Take care, Nina, Denise, Paul. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.